This is the brief on the medical science behind In Darkness We Sleep. Welcome to a quick sidetrack we call Read and Learn, where we focus on the facts behind the fiction. We're focusing on the novel In Darkness We Sleep, a thriller by Troy St. James, where medicine from the natural world meets the modern world. In this visceral, honestly horrifying scenario isn't just a hypothetical thing. Check this out.
So Jason survives this catastrophic crash, spends 2 years in a coma, and wakes up in a Denver hospital to find his arm is completely dead to his own mind. So today, for our deep dive, we're taking a stack of sources, combining this incredibly well-researched fiction with a whole pile of peer-reviewed clinical neurology journals and medical diagnostic manuals.
Right, because we want to look at the real science behind this exact nightmare.
Exactly. Our mission today is to use Jason's story for you, the listener, to understand the medical reality of monoplegia. We're going to figure out how brain trauma physically severs the connection to just a single limb and look at the actual, sometimes brutal technologies helping real patients fight to get their bodies back.
It's a really great lens for this topic because, well, the author doesn't rely on medical magic,
Right, no magic spells here.
Exactly. In the novel, Jason's condition is quickly identified by a native medicine man and hospital worker named Willie. And Willie correctly points out that Jason is dealing with monoplegia caused by a severe traumatic injury. And medically speaking, the symptoms Jason experiences are just textbook for this condition.
Well, let's get into those symptoms, because reading the book, the sheer physical reality of it is jarring. I mean, he has this complete inability to move his left fingers.
Yeah.
And initially, his arm is icy cold to the touch. But as the tissue begins to, quote-unquote, wake up, he doesn't just get movement back.
No, not at all.
He gets this severe, deep, throbbing pain at the wrist and the inside of the elbow. I mean, it sounds like absolute agony.
It really is. So we define monoplegia as paralysis localized to a single limb. When it affects the arm, like Jason experiences, neurology journals refer to it as brachial monoplegia.
Brachial, okay.
Right. And if it were the leg, we'd call it crural monoplegia, though the arm is much more common in adults.
Yeah.
And that pain you mentioned, that is a critical feature.
Really? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, assume paralysis is just like a quiet absence of feeling or movement.
Yeah.
Like it's just nothingness.
Yeah, it's a huge misconception. The onset of brachial paralysis is often really explosive. Patients deal with hands curling inward, severe muscle spasticity, and just terrible pain that often starts in the shoulder and shoots all the way down the arm.
Okay, wait. So if his arm is paralyzed and it's hanging there lifeless, wouldn't it start turning purple or cold because it's essentially dying off from a lack of use? I'm picturing an arm that is just slowly decaying because the brain isn't, using it anymore.
I get why you'd think that. That is a very common assumption. But it points to a fascinating clinical paradox.
Okay.
The vascular system in that arm is completely separate from the motor nervous system.
Oh.
Yeah. So Jason's heart is still pumping blood perfectly fine. His veins and arteries are doing their job. The tissue of his arm isn't dying from a lack of oxygen or nutrients. It maintains a strong pulse and totally normal blood flow. The biological machinery of the arm itself is completely alive.
Okay, so the arm is alive, the blood is flowing. It's like having a perfectly functioning lamp plugged into a wall in your living room, but the wiring behind the drywall has been chewed through by a mouse.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
Right, because the physical hardware of the lamp is perfectly fine. The power plant miles away is still generating electricity. But the physical pathway that delivers the signal is severed, so the power just never reaches the bulb.
That captures the mechanics perfectly. The hardware is sound, the transmission is broken, so the immediate medical priority becomes figuring out, what chewed through the drywall.
But how does an injury to the head or spine result in one specific arm suddenly shutting down? I mean, why just the arm?
Well, if we look at the broader clinical data, cerebral palsy is actually the most common cause of monoplegia overall.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But when we look specifically at adult patients like Jason, direct physical trauma and stroke are the primary drivers. And the reason it targets one specific arm comes down to the highly specialized geography of the brain.
Geography of the brain, okay.
Yeah, so when a stroke or severe head trauma causes monoplegia, the damage is usually localized to very specific regions, specifically the primary motor cortex, the corticospinal tract, or the somatosensory cortex.
Okay, hold on. The motor cortex makes intuitive sense. Motor means movement. If you damage the movement center, you can't move. But you mentioned the somatosensory cortex. I thought sensory was just for feeling things like touch, temperature, that sort of thing. Why would losing your sense of touch paralyze your arm?
That's a great question.
Because, like, if I close my eyes in a dark room, I can still wave my arm around just fine without seeing or feeling anything brushing against it.
You might not be brushing against an external object, sure, but your brain is absolutely still feeling the arm itself.
Wait, feeling the arm itself?
Yeah. The somatosensory areas process sensation, yes, but that includes something called proprioception. That's your brain's ability to perceive the position and movement of your body in space.
Oh, wow.
Your brain requires a constant, uninterrupted stream of sensory feedback from your joints and muscles just to monitor and adjust your movement.
Wait, so it's a feedback loop. The brain doesn't just send a command and walk away.
Exactly the opposite. It's an incredibly tight, continuous dialogue. If that somatosensory area is damaged, your brain is effectively flying blind.
That is wild.
It is. Because if it cannot feel where the arm currently is, the weight of it, the tension in the muscles, it cannot safely or effectively orchestrate the complex muscle contractions needed to move it. So the brain simply cannot execute the movement. The motor command might be totally intact, but without sensory confirmation, the system just shuts down.
Wow. That fundamentally changes how I think about movement. It's not a one-way street at all. It's a constant negotiation.
Precisely.
But if we are talking about brain damage from a stroke, I mean, the brain controls the entire body. How is it that only one limb is affected? When I hear about stroke victims, I usually hear about like half their body being paralyzed.
Yeah, you're thinking of hemiplegia, which is paralysis of an entire half of the body, say the left arm, left torso, and left side of the face.
Right.
Monoplegia is essentially a highly specific, localized subset of that. The brain lesion, or the stroke damage, was so incredibly precise that it only knocked out the very specific neural real estate dedicated to that one arm. And we also have to distinguish this from monoparesis.
Monoparesis. I've heard the term paresis used with vocal cords. It usually means a weakness, not a total paralysis.
That's exactly the key distinction. Monoparesis is when a single limb is profoundly weak, but you still retain some voluntary motor function. You might struggle to lift a coffee cup, but you can still twitch your fingers.
Okay, got it.
But monoplegia is a medical research council power grade of 0.
A power grade of 0. That sounds ominous.
It's the clinical term for a total, absolute lack of limb strength. There is 0 voluntary muscle contraction happening, no matter how hard the patient concentrates.
So if the brain is this incredibly complex, dense web of billions of neurons, and the damage is just a tiny microscopic lesion somewhere in that web, how on earth do doctors find the broken wire without cutting someone's skull open?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah, because in the novel, Jason's physical therapists are manually pulling on his arm, and they talk about ordering an ultrasound or checking his spinal cord because finding the exact break just isn't obvious.
And that reflects real-world clinical frustration. The nerve pathways are largely invisible to the naked eye. And conditions that eventually progress to paraplegia, which is paralysis of the lower half of the body, might actually initially present as just a weak or paralyzed arm.
Oh, wow. So it could be a warning sign of something much worse.
Exactly. So the diagnostic process is intense detective work. Once they confirm that power grade of 0 with a physical exam, they have to rely on advanced imaging and electrical testing to map the damage.